serious.
I'll try it again.
I'd say 5 times.
You know, here's the thing with this stuff. Just when you think you know the best way to do something, either somebody comes along and says, hey, did you think about that? Oh, shoot, I didn't think about that. That's amazing. So there really is no... Is he landing on the roof? There really is no single way to do things. There's like, here's an example. When we get to the layer masking section, is a similar thing. We're going to get to the layer masking in Photoshop and how you can use that to combine the best elements of different images into one image. I was doing it one way, and I sent this presentation to Jim Janis, and he sent me an email back and said, what are you doing? Like, why don't you do it this way? It's 100 times easier. And I looked at his way and I went, wow, 5 years I've been doing this the worst possible. It was effective, what I was doing, but it was much harder than it needed to be. Anyway, I had to change the whole section because he had a much better way of doing it. So, you know, that's a great point. You know, there's always different ways to do things, and experimenting is the only way to figure out what's going to be best. Okay, so that's dark frames. Flat framing. We talked about field illumination and how it can be uneven. And that is an unfortunate problem. Even systems that have, you know, a 50mm image circle or big image circles, they're not evenly illuminated for the most part. Some of them are, particularly if you have like a small chip, you may not need flat frames. So for example, you have a, over like my 35mm chip, I have an 11% light drop off from the center of the chip to the edge of the chip when I'm shooting through my RC. 11%, it's not that much. In the center, it's very evenly illuminated though. There's like a 1% drop off between the center 1/4. So if I was shooting with an ST10 camera, flat frames would not be nearly as critical. But shooting with a big chip, it's all of a sudden a lot more critical that I have that
or a DSLR.
DSLR, it depends on the DSLR. Like a 5D, it's enormously critical that you have flat frames. With like a 300D that I was shooting with, it wasn't so important. For me, it wasn't so important. I had some creative ways of getting around flat framing. They weren't the best ways, but they were ways. But yeah, it's an important thing. And what the flat frame does is it's a map of the optical system. It's not a map of the camera's flaws. It's a map of the optical system's flaws. And we'll look at some examples of what these things are and walk through the processing of an image. Have you ever seen an image that had those annoying streaks in it? Vertical streaks? Some of the DSI cameras are notorious for this. What that is the lack of bias subtraction. And I've never used this technique, so this is theoretical knowledge on my part. So keep that in mind. But everything I read about bias frames is that when you're reading out columns of pixels, sometimes the values will be changed slightly as the register is reading out individual pixels. Every column gets read out, and as it's reading it out, the last pixel might get a few more electrons tacked on than the first pixel. So what you get is kind of this streaking in the image in some places. You get some banding. And it's something that can be mapped. So what people have done is they take 0-second dark frames, and it will map out any type of change modifications that take place when the registers are reading out the individual columns. I have a feeling that flat framing might do this for you as well, because if you think about it, your flat frames would also have that problem of increasing having the streaking in it, I would imagine. So I've read some things online that say if you do flat framing, you don't need to do bias subtraction. This is a great area where I would recommend you experiment with your setup and see whether bias frames are needed or not. I simply don't have much experience with these.
But the reason they're not the same is that when you flat frame, you divide. When you do a bias subtraction, it's a subtraction.
No, it's a that's a good point. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so there you go. So that's why Dave's here. Okay, good. That's good to know. Yeah, I don't do bias subtraction, so I don't have the slightest idea.
You need to subtract your bias, also do bias subtraction from your flat.
That makes sense. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And if your flats are too long, you might need to do dark subtraction from them as well. Great. Calibration is not easy, in case you're not figuring this out. I think calibration is really hard, and here's a great point. I've been doing this for a couple of years. I'm by no means an expert, and I still have challenges with calibrating my images, as you will see as we move forward. So let's take a look at some of these things here. This is an image of M51, the Whirlpool Galaxy that I shot from TDS about 2 weeks ago or so. This is when we were out there, Bob. When we were out there last. This is the image one of the images that I shot. You can already. This is just a raw frame that I shot with this with the camera, and you can already see some issues with it. See that shadow at the top? Like, can you actually see it? And it's harder to see on the screen. Yeah, it's hard to see. All right. Well, it'll get more apparent as we go along here. But there actually is a shadow across the top of that image where that top circle is. It's a little darker. You can sort of see it.
You want more light still?
It's darker.
It's
No,
just
it's
a
okay.
circle.
It's okay. It's going to be really obvious in a minute. And you can see the massive number of hot pixels in here in this area, all in the black areas. It's just, this is a very noisy image. This is a completely uncalibrated image out of my RC, my Ritchie-Chrétien 12.1 inch telescope with a S-Big STL camera attached to it.
And
So
what's the integration time?
this is a single 15-minute exposure, I believe. Don't hold me to that. We'll check in a minute. You can look at the FITS header and I'll tell you exactly what it is. I think
Okay.
they're 15-minute subs. Maybe 10 though. Don't hold me to it. They're either 10 or 15. So there's a lot of problems with this image. This is not a pretty image by any means. By the way, this is fully stretched to show a lot of the dark noise. So that's why it looks all blown out in the galaxy there. That's because this is just a quick stretch that I did to show all the flaws. If you opened this up in raw mode, it would look almost completely black. You wouldn't be able to see anything.
Right.
So this is a dark frame that is associated with that image. And you're going to start to see some other issues here associated with my dark frame. Can you see that little line on the right-hand side there? This dark frame shows more than just hot pixels. It also shows column defects. I have a class 2 CCD chip, which means that it's not perfectly manufactured, which means there are some flaws in the chip. And that column is broken on the camera. Fortunately, it's way off to the side, and that's why S-Big didn't throw it in the bin and throw it away, and they went ahead and sent it to me. Fortunately, with my camera, that is the only one that's a significant problem on the camera. If you had a class 1 chip, there would be no column defects like this at all. Interestingly enough, mine's a class 2, which means it's supposed to have no more than 2 column defects. Mine actually has 4 column defects, but 2 of them are so dim that you almost never see them. So I guess S-Big felt like it was okay. They were below some threshold. You never see them on almost any image, except in really long H-alpha images. They show up sometime. Okay, so this is an image that has been dark subtracted. So pretty big difference between that and that. Look at the noise difference. The noise has been blown completely out of this image, but now we're starting to see other problems. Calibrating an image is like peeling back the layers on an onion. More dirty laundry is visible every layer that goes down. The image gets better and better, but it's like every time you peel off a layer, you're like, damn it, there's more problems I have to fix. And this shows an awful lot of them. It shows a nice range of problems that you have. Notice that, this field is nowhere near evenly illuminated. Remember the shadow across the top that you couldn't see before? All of a sudden you can see it real clearly. And you can see that big shadow across the top. You can see dust, you can sort of see dust donuts on the upper right hand side there. Those are little bits of dust that are on my RGB filters and my luminance filter. As the light comes through, the dust casts a shadow on the chip, and you can see those shadows pretty clearly. And interestingly, there's another little flaw on the left-hand side. You can see those little streaks in the upper left-hand corner. Those are flaws associated with my adaptive optics system. That's a big plate of glass that sits in front of my camera and quivers and theoretically helps improve the seeing, and it really just helps with the guiding of the camera, makes guiding the telescope super easy and very, very accurate. Having the extra glass in your optical system increases the probability that you're going to have stuff like this. I don't really know what those are. I just know that they only appeared after I put my adaptive optics system in. It's some kind of a reflection, some kind of I don't know. I don't know what it is. But they're there on every image, so they have to be dealt with. So we'll deal with these things as we go forward. This is a flat frame. I've stretched the heck out of this thing to show every little flaw, and holy mackerel do I need to clean my filters. But, you know, every filter has dust on it. Then don't kid yourself. Yeah, I can clean this thing till I'm blue in the face and put it back in, and I'll have half this much just in the act of putting it in. That's like I'm in a clean room, and even still, you know, my telescope sits up and points up at the sky all night long, and guess what's at the very bottom of that tube? It's my filters. The first thing that something falling down there is going to hit. Dust comes down, hits the filter, presto, I have a new dust donut. So this is this is called a flat frame. It looks bad, but again, this is an 11% illumination difference. Between this black corner down here and that bright middle is an 11% difference in illumination. Not terrible, not too bad. By the way, the majority of the vignetting, this is called vignetting, or this optical illusion that is created by this lack of flat fielding here. Lack of having a flat field is exacerbated by the off-axis guider. The off-axis guider and the AOL, the adaptive optics, are actually small.